Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Welcome. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Alberta government introduced major legislation impacting transgender people, and now they're being sued over it. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says his party will not join the federal Conservatives or Bloc to try and bring down the Trudeau government. And inspired by a crosswalk honoring veterans in Hamilton, Ontario, a Lethbridge City Councillor is hoping to have one painted here as well in the Windy City.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government introduced bills which affect transgender people. Now, one would include requiring children under the age of 16 to have parental consent if they want to change their names or pronouns at school. Premier Danielle Smith says it's all in an effort to keep the kids safe. But Alberta NDP leader Nad Nenshi, meanwhile, says the UCP is picking on vulnerable people.
The amendments we're proposing would bring more transparency, clarity, and consistency to Alberta's classrooms, while also respecting parents' indisputable role as caregivers. If passed, any student 15 and under who wants teachers or other school staff to call them by a new gender-related name or pronoun would need their parents to be notified and would require their parents' consent. Students who are 16 or 17 years old may do so without parental consent, but their parents would still need to be notified. Additionally, parents would have to be notified each time subject matter in the classroom deals primarily and explicitly with gender identity, sexual orientation, or human sexuality. As part of these specific changes, parents would have to opt their children in to those lessons instead of opt out, the way it is right now.
1/4 of all of their legislation in this session is on anti-trans legislation, something no one is asking for. There's nothing about hiring more EAs or giving more funding from the lowest funding in the country per student to the education system. There's nothing about cleaning up backlogs in the healthcare system or getting more family doctors in.
Now, two LGBTQ2+ groups say they will be taking legal action in response to the proposed legislation by the Alberta government, which they say is discriminatory. EGAL and Skipping Stone Foundation made the announcement following the introduction of the UCP's legislation. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says his caucus will not join the Conservatives and Bloc to bring down the Liberal government. Singh says the Tories' plan to cut programs, including pharmacare, is the biggest threat to Canadians.
And the biggest threat to our vision for a better future are Conservative cuts. And now the Bloc wants to help King Cut himself, Pierre Poilievre, cut the things that you need. Cut your pensions, cut health care, cut the dental care program. We want more seniors to be able to take care of their teeth. They want to cut it. They want to cut pharmacare. We want free birth control across this country. So I will not let Pierre Poilievre, the King Cut, or the Bloc call the shots. I don't want a Liberal government. I don't want Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. There will be an election, and when that election comes, people will have an important choice.
All matters in the House of Commons are still suspended right now until the Trudeau government hands over documents to the RCMP pertaining to Sustainable Development Technology Canada, also known as the Green Slush Fund. BC Tory MP Mark Strahl says the Liberals should not ignore the will of the elected members of Parliament.
Comes right down to what members of Parliament, what our role is. Our role is to hold the government to account. And this is true not just for members of the opposition or opposition parties. It is supposed to be true for every member of Parliament that is not a member of the government. And I think there is a lack of knowledge or over time, every member that is, in this case, a Liberal member, believes that they are a member of the government. They are most certainly not. The Cabinet is the government. The Cabinet is the government of Canada, and the rest of us have an obligation to hold that government to account. And that certainly used to be the way that it was.
The outgoing CEO of the CBC has been fined by Canada's Ethics Commissioner. According to a report from Blacklock's reporter Catherine Tate, who's earning almost $500,000 a year, was found guilty for breaching the Conflict of Interest Act. The penalty came after Tate said no one asked her about her accomplishments as head of the CBC, while refusing to state whether her upcoming retirement would come with additional severance or bonus pay. And by the way, the total of the fine that Catherine Tate has to pay is $200. An NDP MP and some 60 Scoop survivors are calling on the federal government to criminalize residential school denialism. They say despite proof of unmarked graves and missing kids, Canadians continue to attack survivors and Indigenous families. They say those statements should be outlawed.
It's unacceptable to me. I have talked to the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. I know he's said in the media that he's supportive of the bill. Special Interlocutor Kimberly Murray, survivors once again were expected to tell stories. Why? To help us reconcile in this country. Is this going to be another example like the TRC where survivors our stories are used and the government fails to act? They failed to act on most of the calls to action of the TRC. Are they now going to fail to act on the obligations that have come out of the report of the Special Interlocutor? I'm calling them on it. They have to stop abusing survivors, abusing the stories of survivors, and act to put in place the obligations that are outlined in the report that's coming out from the Special Interlocutor.
Well, it wasn't a bad day today in Lethbridge weather-wise. We had sunshine mixed with clouds and fairly mild. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a quick peek at the weather forecast. Jeanette, how's the weekend shaping up so far?
Well, very nicely, actually, Hal. This evening, a few clouds, winds at only 15 kilometers per hour. Those wind gusts returning tomorrow, though, up to 40 kilometers. But hey, look at that. Double digits for Saturday, up to 11 degrees, and plenty of sunshine, a little bit of mix of sun and cloud there. But all in all, not a bad looking Saturday. I'll be back later with a look at Sunday and beyond.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Well, the city of Lethbridge has declared the start of snow routes here in our city. The announcement will mean the activation of temporary on-street parking bans and the readiness of clearing over 83 kilometers of residential streets of snow and ice. A new windrow assistance service approved by the city this summer will be piloted this year. The program will assist locals who cannot move the snow themselves or struggle with mobility and accessibility issues.
Just a reminder for residents to please plan for the winter, plan ahead for your trips, winterize your vehicle, and stay informed with all the City of Lethbridge notifications. First, we plow and maintain the real main roads, the arterial roads like Woopab, Scenic, Mayor McGrath. And once we are done with those, then we move on to priority 2 and 3 routes. We have an annual budget of $3.8 million just for transportation, streets and road clearance. And we had some significant events earlier this year in February and March. But there's not a lot of snow in the forecast, so we think we'll be good and be able to fulfill services within budget.
Now, the city also announced that Lethbridge's collection of curbside organics will shift to a bi-weekly collection schedule. The Curbside Organics Collection Program has collected 11,500 tons of organic waste out of the landfill since it began last year, which translates to about 350 kilograms per household.
What we ask is residents, first and foremost, use the Lethbridge Loop app, so download that on their mobile device. It's going to give them great reminders, not only for curbside organics collection, when that's going to be taking place, but also recycling, garbage, as well as some of your snow route information that's going to be coming up. With biweekly, the reason that we moved to biweekly collection is because of the yard waste factor. So we don't see as much of that material making its way into the green cart. We're focused more solely on food waste, and so the 2-week schedule tends to work a little bit better for that.
More information on Lethbridge's winter service changes can be found on the City of Lethbridge website or on the Lethbridge Loop app. A certain city councillor in our city has been inspired by what he saw on social media of a crosswalk honoring veterans in Hamilton, Ontario. That crosswalk is located at the corner of King Street East and Highway 8 in Stony Creek. Look at that, wonderful. The pictures and video of the crosswalk have since gone viral, with Canadians in a number of other cities saying they would like to create something very similar. Lethbridge City Councillor Ryan Parker joins us now from his home in the city to say that the wheels are currently in motion to create something similar right here. Now, Ryan, we have a number of veterans who live in Lethbridge, and you want to see something very similar painted possibly by what, the cenotaph downtown?
It just looked really classy. And when I saw it, I said, we need to do something like that in Lethbridge. It's kind of it's just, why not? It's hard to believe we didn't do something like this sooner.
So obviously you're going to work with the Legion on a concept. What has to happen before you can really present this to council?
You know, it's funny, in the private sector, or if it was your house, you would do it instantly within the next day. But when you work within a corporation like the city of Lethbridge, like any other municipality, there's process. And we want to make sure we do it correctly, because I believe there was a bit of pushback when it wasn't done properly up north. And so I think it's important that we work in consultation with our local branch of the Royal Canadian Legion to make sure it's done properly, because we don't want to do anything that might be offensive. So that's what the resolution states.
So Ryan, you're hoping to have this crosswalk painted sometime this year. How soon can we make it happen?
I would like to have done it yesterday, and if not yesterday, but we have to have process here, Hal. And so I need to take the resolution to council, and the resolution is complete. I can forward it to you when it gets ratified by the agenda committee. But right now, it's the earliest I can put it on the agenda would be the 12th of November. Now, of course, that's the day after Remembrance Day. But I think if we do this, we can do it in the month of November, and I think we can do it year round. So it isn't something that's just going to be temporary. I like to see it as permanent in our community.
And what about costs? Have you looked into that as well on behalf of the taxpayer?
Well, you know, most organizations who do these in our community, different organizations, they usually do it out of pocket, out of their organization. But I don't think we have to make the Legion pay for this. I think the taxpayers would be more than happy to sponsor something like this. And from what it sounds like, it's going to be under $10,000. So my resolution says to a maximum of $10,000.
Thanks so much for your time today, Ryan. That was Lethbridge City Councillor Ryan Parker, who will be presenting a resolution on November 12th of creating a crosswalk honoring our veterans here in Lethbridge. A New Brunswick woman who lost 2 soldier sons to PTSD says she's honored to be named this year's National Silver Cross Mother. 78-year-old Maureen Anderson will head to Ottawa for the Remembrance Day ceremony. She'll lay a wreath on behalf of mothers who've lost a child during active military duty. Anderson says she hopes to use her time in the role to keep speaking about post-traumatic stress disorder and to encourage veterans to get all of the help that they can. An elderly woman has died in a Calgary townhouse fire. Emergency officials say her son, meanwhile, suffered smoke inhalation trying to save her. The fire department says a man sleeping upstairs was woken by a smoke alarm and went downstairs to see a growing fire in the kitchen. He went outside, but then realized his mother was still trapped inside and tried to get back in. He said the smoke made it impossible to find his mother, whose body was later recovered by firefighters. Lethbridge Chief Fire Marshal Troy Hicks says when it comes to a fire in your home, it's always good to have a game plan in place to help you escape. In a previous interview with Bridge City News, Hicks says a proper plan will help to ensure that you're educated and prepared so that you stand a better chance of getting out alive.
There's a few things you really need to hit. Make sure everyone in your house knows what to do when the smoke detector goes off. They have an escape plan. You know, they need to, if their bedrooms are up on the second floor, you know, they can either go down the stairs or whatever they have to do to get out. And they need to have a meeting place. Your meeting place should not be hopefully crossing a road just because of traffic. You want to be careful with that. And if you also have a fenced-in backyard, you don't really want your meeting place to be in the backyard because now you're trapped back there if the fire gets out of control. But there is lots of things. People can contact me at the fire department, and I can definitely give them as much information as they like for their home safety plan.
Now, to enhance response to emergency events like wildfires and flooding, a partnership agreement was signed here in southwestern Alberta. Lethbridge County, along with the towns of Colehurst, Nobleford, Picture Butte, and the village of Barons, are part of this new regional emergency management partnership agreement. Heath Wright, Regional Manager of Emergency Services with Lethbridge County, says the goal is to provide equal access to specialized emergency training for municipal staff.
Partnership will also help us streamline our process by creating consistent emergency management procedures across all communities. Emergency management is one thing that we've noticed. It's about preparation, and I think that's worldwide known. We've had a lot of incidents in our area, a lot all across Canada that I think we're all aware of. That to have a united front and to have the partnership and bench strength and collaboration of you. So if there was a wildfire, for example, we've had a few that are significant back in 2011, 2012. I was actually personally involved in those. To have the ability to reach out for resources or labor force or any type of manpower is instrumental to make sure that we all come together, we all have the same training, and we're all talking from the same book.
This gives us the opportunity to pool some resources, come together, and really take this to the next level where we have a subject matter expert to do the planning and to get us prepared. We have to keep an open mind. Obviously, disasters don't know boundaries. They don't care what a line on a map is. So I think it's important that we continue to have those conversations with our surrounding municipalities.
Well, it's very important. It gives us that much more ability to, with the resources, to do that much more training with more people. And move that much further ahead.
The partnership's goals include enhanced training, streamlined processes, and cross-boundary response capabilities. You know, the internet has connected us to a global community, and sometimes that can mean that you could become the victim of a cybercrime. Stephen Graham, computer technology instructor at Lethbridge Polytechnic, shares how to recognize those suspicious email messages which can put your computer and personal information at risk.
Quite often we'll see that you'll get an email that says, hey, here's an important bank statement, or here's a shipping information from FedEx or Amazon or some other big name company. Yeah, so you click on it and it takes you to a website and you say, well, you have to open this file. So you need to download this app to open this file. And as soon as you download that app and install it, you have invited somebody into your house. Malware's like vampires. They don't get in unless you invite them usually.
Catch more of this insightful interview with computer technology instructor Stephen Graham and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our program. Lethbridge Polytechnic is looking at ways to make the aquaponics industry more sustainable and cost efficient. Now, aquaponics, which integrates fish, plants, and microorganisms into a soilless environment, eliminates the waste from fish to feed microorganisms. It then converts matter into nutrients for plants, which in turn cleans the water that the fish live in. New research discovered that canola-based protein can be used for fish feed, which can then create a new market for canola producers.
We've been working with Canola Council of Canada and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada to create a project where we hope to study their idea of replacing part of fish meal with a canola-based meal. Why it's so important? Because fish meal is not really sustainable. In order to grow fish, you have to kill fish. If we replace at least part of fish meal with a canola-based meal, it will be more sustainable, but also more financially viable.
The project will be funded by multiple agricultural organizations and government agriculture programs over the next few years to the tune of $300,000. And Savinov says they will receive state-of-the-art equipment that the rest of the world has never seen. Looking forward to checking out some of that equipment. Looking forward to the weekend as well. You know, the average high for this time of year is about 7 degrees. We hovered right around that, but good news, things are warming up for the weekend. Full weather details are on deck. We had sunshine mixed with clouds earlier today in Lethbridge and still fairly mild. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, if we want to take our bikes or maybe e-scooters for a spin around Henderson Lake tomorrow, it might be a nice day for it.
Well, it will be a bit of a slow climb to get to that 11 degrees there. It will be double digits, though, by the time we do reach that. Expect some wind chill in the morning, and then, like I said, that slow climb throughout the day. Most of the day going to be sitting at just single digits, so maybe put off that ride until a little bit later in the day, or even wait till Thursday. Look at that temperature. So as we get there, Sunday, seeing lots of sunshine, high of 7 degrees, back up to double digits on Monday, high of 10, and then back to 6 on Tuesday with mainly cloudy skies, 11 again on Wednesday, and then 16 on Thursday. So we are kind of like a little bit of a roller coaster, but the average high for this time of year is 7 degrees. So over the next 7 days, we're hitting well above that target quite a few times. Average low -5. Record high on this day was 21 degrees, happening back in 1981. And in 84, we were sitting at -26, which was the coldest on record for this day. Sun rose this morning at 8:22 and sunset this evening at 6:07. So we're now seeing 9 hours and 45 minutes of daylight. Don't forget to turn your clocks back on a Sunday as we get that extra hour of sleep. That means the sun's going to go down a little bit sooner in the day as well. But before we get to that, let's look at tomorrow's temperatures across the nation. 12 degrees for a high in Victoria with a mix of sun and cloud. 30% chance of showers in Vancouver. High of 10 degrees. 3 for the high in Edmonton and 6 in Calgary with a mix of sun and cloud in both of those cities with 20 to 40 kilometer per hour winds. Across Alberta tomorrow, as we look to the rest of the prairies, mainly sunny skies in Saskatchewan. 8 for the high in Saskatoon. 10 in Regina. Mix of sun and cloud expected in Winnipeg tomorrow with a high of 7 degrees. Now, as we look to the central portion of the country where it's been a lot warmer lately, not so much tomorrow. High of 10 degrees only in Toronto. They're going to feel that compared to that 21 degrees that they had earlier. Mix of sun and cloud there. Ottawa 5 degrees and 6 for the high in Montreal tomorrow with clear skies. Now, as we look to the Maritimes here, Fredericton seeing a high of 7 degrees, mainly clear skies, things burning off around noon, especially more clouds in the morning there. Halifax, 30% chance of showers, 9 for the high, 6 for the high in Charlottetown, also with some clearing skies there, and periods of rain ending in the morning in St. John's with up to 50 kilometer per hour winds and a high of 4 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
A new partial strike by dock workers at the Port of Montreal has shut down 2 container terminals at the country's second biggest port. The 2 terminals will be closed until further notice as the longshore workers began another strike earlier today. The move is just the latest job action by the union, which includes an ongoing strike on overtime shifts and a 3-day strike earlier this month at the same container terminals. The Canadian Union of Public Employees says it's willing to call off the strike if it could possibly reach a deal on a portion of the dispute. Now, the Maritime Employers Association, however, says it can't grant the demand to change work schedules without formal negotiations. British Columbia's ports, meanwhile, may once again be locked up on Monday as employers say they have received 72-hour strike notice from the union representing foremen. The union said in September that members voted 96% in favor of strike action, but more recently said had no interest in an industry-wide dispute because it wants to negotiate. The union says DP World is the problem. The Canada Industrial Relations Board, however, says they can't negotiate with just a single employer. Canadians now have one place to appeal banking issues. The federal government made the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investments the sole external complaints body in an effort to reduce delays and complexities. That means consumers who have issues can take them to the OBSI rather than the organization that used to field issues for banks such as RBC, TD, and Scotiabank. Most complaints are still being denied by the OBSI because some consumers misunderstand the extent of bank obligations around issues like fraud. Rideshare giant Uber has banned a customer from its app after one of its Calgary drivers, Mandeep Sehgal, posted a video on social media showing him having to deal with a customer he called racist.
You are in my land. I am the blood of the land. You understand?
He started off, he asked me first question, where are you from? And I was about to tell him where I was. He said, don't lie to me. Asking me about my immigration status was, when I got a little alarmed that, why he wants to know my immigration status. So then I told him that I was a landed resident. And he didn't pay attention to that. And then he kept on going. And then I think he lost it when I said, why you're so judgmental? I'm paying taxes. I'm law-abiding citizen. And, I try to be nice to people. If I have to prove that I belong here, then, it creates a sense of, insecurity. And I was never in that, zone before this incident.
I'm a pure blood of Calgary, Alberta.
Yeah.
That's all I'm trying to tell you, brother.
Yeah, you can get out here on your land. Thank you so much.
According to Sehgal, South Asian Uber drivers are increasingly facing racist taunts, and Uber was taking far too long to hold this particular customer to account. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 98 basis points of the day to 24,255. The Dow was also up 288 points to 42,052. The S&P 500 was up 23 points to 5,728, and the Nasdaq was also up 144 points to 18,239. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 7 cents to 69.33 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 6 cents to $2.65 US. Gold was down $10.61 to $2,736.18 US an ounce, and silver was down 25 cents to $32.40 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.38 per bushel, barley is at $6.25, canola is at $14.74, and corn is at $7.46 per bushel. Live cattle December contract were down $3.75 to $185.92. Feeder cattle November contract were up $1.50 to $246.87, and lean hogs December contract were up 27 cents to $84.07. And the Canadian dollar was slightly down over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 71.70 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the city of Lethbridge is looking into the feasibility of creating a crosswalk to honor our veterans. The campaign is being spearheaded by Councillor Ryan Parker, who was inspired by Crosswalk with the writing Lest We Forget in Hamilton, Ontario, which he saw posted on social media. Parker says he's working with the Legion to conceptualize and then bring it before Council on November the 12th. You know, we spend a lot of time on our electronic devices, which includes our computers. What's the best way of protecting ourselves from becoming victims of a cyber attack? Stephen Graham is a computer tech instructor at Lethbridge Polytechnic. He had a few ideas that he shared with BCN's Jeanette Rocher. Watch for that interview coming up shortly. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Most of us have a love-hate relationship with our computers, don't we? They, along with the internet, have made it so easy to connect with friends around the world, and at the same time have made it easy for the bad guys to commit cyber crimes. So joining us to chat about this today is Stephen Graham. He is a computer information technology instructor at Lethbridge Polytechnic. Welcome, Stephen. Good to have you with us today.
Good to be here. Thanks, Jeanette.
Awesome. Okay, so Stephen, how bad are things with cybersecurity issues these days? Are we gaining ground against cyber criminals, or are they getting more and more clever? It does seem like they're getting more clever, doesn't it?
It does. It's a cat and mouse game. Every time we get better at securing, they get better at breaking, and
Yeah.
it's an age-old story. Ever since we put locks on the doors to our house, people have figured out where to find the windows.
True, exactly. So what are the most common cyber threat? Is it malware?
So probably the most common threat that we actually see the result from is malware, and that could be something like ransomware or cryptojacking or malicious deletion of files or participating in other kinds of attacks. Denial of service is one that we hear a lot about in the news. A lot of it comes down to how that malware gets there, and often it's either through some kind of phishing attack or some kind of like man-in-the-middle kind of attack.
Right. Can you maybe explain the basics of how a malware attack takes place?
Sure. So malware is really just any software that gets installed on your computer that does something bad. And it can get onto your computer a variety of ways. Usually it requires you, the computer user, to install something. And you can do it intentionally or you can do it unwittingly. Quite often we'll see that you'll get an email that says, hey, here's an important bank statement, or here's a shipping information from FedEx or Amazon or some other big name company. And you've probably had one of those.
I've had tons of those, and they come through text messages on your phone too.
Yeah, so you click on it, and it takes you to a website, and you say, well, you have to open this file. So you need to download this app to open this file. And as soon as you download that app and install it, you have invited somebody into your house. Malware's like vampires. They don't get in unless you invite them, usually.
Yeah, and they don't get out very easily either.
And they will not go away. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it almost makes you a little bit suspicious from anything then, because it just seems like every day now there's some sort of an app that we have to download onto our computer. I mean, are most of these safe? Is it mostly the ones that are coming to us that are sort of uninvited, that are unprompted? It just suddenly showed up. Those are the ones we have to be really suspicious of.
We should be pretty suspicious of the ones where somebody says, "Here's new software, you should install it." You should be suspicious of that. It's sort of like restaurant food. You go to a restaurant, you pick from the menu, you choose what you're going to get. If somebody walks up to you on the street and says, "Here's some of my food, you should eat it now," maybe you want to give that a second thought. So when you're working if you work at a company, the company, you'll get an email from HR or from the IT department that says, "We're upgrading this. You should go to this site here and install this." Maybe you want to check and make sure it came from your IT department, but then do the thing that you have to do. If you're just at home and you want to play the newest version of a game, go to an app store. Most of the apps on the two big app stores for your phones are fairly well vetted. But if somebody out of the blue emails you and says, "Oh, you need to install this right away," the alarm bell should go off. If you don't recognize who they are, if there's some kind of urgency implied, like you must do it within 12 hours or the world comes to an end, or if they're directly asking for money or information about you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And those alarm bells are really the signs for a phishing attack, where somebody wants something from you, like access to your computer or access to your company, or just more information about you, like your banking or your social insurance number or any of that.
Yeah, your spidey senses should start tingling for sure if that's happening, right?
Right, yes.
Now, Stephen, we all love a good deal, right? And as we browse the internet, we get, of course, bombarded with pop-up ads. And I understand that some of these can be malware. So how can we recognize what malware is opposed to what it isn't? And most importantly, what are the tools that we can use to protect ourselves against it?
So a lot of that pop-up thing, advertising is advertising, and don't let your spidey senses work in this case. If it feels kind of sketchy, maybe it is kind of sketchy. Maybe the deal is too good to be true. When you're presented with a link, you'll click on it because you want to see more about the deal on shoes. I'm looking for shoes. That's why that one pops to mind. And I'm looking for a good deal on shoes. And this one pops up, and I click on it, and it says on the ad that it's for such and such. But then I see immediately in my browser that it's some other place. I'm no longer at insert big name shoe company here. I'm at something else, right? So right away, that's a stop doing things kind of moment. So once you start clicking on things, that's where you're giving your computer permission to do the work. So you just kind of need to really take a look at whether what's being presented to you is actually connecting to the right place.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And of course, you mentioned this off the top there with phishing scams. And I understand that these phishing scams are still one of the top problems out there. So can you explain how these work and what we should do to avoid these?
Yeah, so from the purpose of a phishing scam in the big picture is to get information from you, either directly about you so that they can access your personal finances or personal anything, or to get enough information about you that they could impersonate you to someone else and pretend to be you to get someone else to trust them because they trust you, right? So that's the whole purpose. So the way it usually works is someone will approach you by email or by text and say, "I'm so and so, and I really need some information about this," or you need to enter your password on this website because it's being compromised. Really, what they're looking for is, what is your password, so that they can immediately go and change your password, and now they own your account.
Yeah.
And that is super terrible. So one of the strongest ways to combat that currently is using what's called two-factor authentication. And a lot of people don't like it, but it's very secure. So when I go to log in, I go to the site that I know, not to the site that they direct me to. I would go to my Amazon or my Google or my Facebooks or wherever I'm going, and I put in my username and my password, and then it sends my email or my cell phone a code. And then I have to be in physical possession of that other thing to be able to log in. Right. So, unless somebody steals your phone and it does this, you're going to be pretty safe, because without that code, you can't get in.
Yeah, no, exactly. I love those. You're right. It can be a little bit daunting and annoying, but I feel more secure when that happens for sure.
So if you do accidentally disclose some personal information about yourself that allows somebody to try and hack your account, you still have the peace of mind where it says, hey, a login attempt happened here. If that happened, maybe you want to check that you're still secure.
Right. Now, every so often, we also hear about another ransomware attack with criminals demanding big bucks. So how do these work, and what can businesses do to prevent these from happening?
So, ransomware is terrible. It gets its name simply from the kidnapping aspect, but these kidnappers aren't going to return your whatever they've stolen, probably. So how it works is, once you've let that software into your system, it will begin to encrypt everything. So it locks it all up with a password that's only known to the ransomer, and they will demand outrageous sums of money, or even rageous, I guess, sums of money to unlock and release your data. There is no guarantee that they'll do that. If they've already broken your system, you might not trust them to do that as well. So the first line of defense is education. Don't let people into your network who aren't supposed to be there. Don't open software that you're not supposed to be there. Avoid the malware in the first place. So that's the first line of defense. The second line of defense is keep separated backups. So if you're a business, you should have a backup plan. Talk to your IT provider about making sure that you have a solid IT backup plan where your data are frequently taken off the system and stored separately where they can't be manipulated. So then if you unfortunately fall victim to a ransomware attack, you can say, I guess we just bite that day's worth of data loss, and we restore from the backup, and we carry on as if we're in business.
Yeah. Now, to what degree are business owners investing in cybersecurity to prevent these kinds of attacks? And I mean, we're talking major money here, aren't we?
I imagine so. That's not really my strong suit. I don't know a lot about that business economics side. I know that the larger the business, the very much more money they will spend in assessing cybersecurity risk. We often talk about footprint, and so the footprint of a larger organization is larger, and so you have more real estate, as it were, to protect more data, more information, and it's more valuable. It's more lucrative for the bad guys, as it were, to come in. So the larger the company, probably the more is spent. A lot of smaller companies maybe don't spend as much attention as they should, maybe simply because, well, I just run a mom and pop shop. Nobody's interested in my data. But maybe they are. If you get 100 mom and pop shops for $1,000 each, that's $100,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
So,
exactly.
and when it comes down to your business, how much can you afford to not be in business? How long can you be out of off the market?
It's like insurance in a sense, isn't it?
Absolutely. It is part of business continuity. What do you do if your computer systems go down? Like, at all, but certainly at the hands of somebody nefarious, that'd be bad.
Yeah, definitely.
And even the damage to reputation. If I've been phished, and someone were to then go out and send emails from my email account or from my Facebook account saying, hey, I just discovered this great thing. What damage to my reputation does that bring? What damage does that bring to my company or my institution?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen those before with some of our
Yes, we
friends
have.
on online, and it just doesn't sound like them. It seems a little suspicious, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
getting back to businesses, it seems then reasonable for businesses to start hiring more cybersecurity professionals. So how much demand is there now for hiring these tech people to provide this security?
There's a pretty steady but growing demand for this as people become more aware of the risks and it becomes, well, back to the finances of it, the risk that you have to mitigate. It becomes a very good place to be if you're in the IT field. Again, with smaller companies, there's maybe a little bit less of it, but certainly there are IT companies around that will have people on staff that have some cybersecurity training that can help you as a smaller business mitigate that. If you're a larger business, you probably have your own IT department, and somebody on your staff probably should be responsible for cybersecurity.
Yeah. As a member of the public, we all have gone to hotels and used public Wi-Fi, restaurants, hotels, library. How safe is that?
I'm gonna go against what most people think, and I'm gonna say it's mostly safe. The kind of attack you would get on a public Wi-Fi is typically what's called a man-in-the-middle attack, and that's where you think you're talking to the hotel Wi-Fi, but you're really talking to the criminal in room 308, and the criminal in room 308 has their Wi-Fi set to Marriott or wherever you're staying, and then they're passing it through to the hotel or whatever, and so they can see all the traffic that you're sending. Right? That's what it is, and it's probably not good. Like, I would not want to discuss a lot of I wouldn't do my banking over that. I wouldn't send any corporate messaging over that. But you can subscribe to VPN services, or quite often, if you're in a large organization, your company has a VPN policy. So even if there is somebody in the middle listening, everything is encrypted, so they can't figure out what you're saying.
Wow. Well, Stephen, it looks like we're out of time here, but it's such a big topic. We could have asked, I had so many more questions for you here, but we'll have to have you back on. But we appreciate you coming on today, Stephen.
Thank you so much for having me, and just check your email. Stay safe.
Southern Alberta is known for its love of basketball, but I'll bet most of us aren't fully aware of how far back this goes historically. Today's guest certainly does, though. We are joined by Ken Hamilton. He is from Lethbridge and spent decades as a basketball referee here. He is also the author of Southern Alberta Basketball, A History in Pictures. Ken, welcome to Bridge City News. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, Ken, we're not just talking about one book. This is a series of books, 9 in total. Can you give us a brief overview of what the books focus on? Because I understand a number of different Southern Alberta towns are touched on here.
Yeah, and to step back one more, this is series 1. We plan to have a series 2, which will be 6 or 7 more books.
Wow.
They kind of tend to evolve as I get writing them. Series 1, I had no intention of writing something like this. We were at a college men's game in February of 2023, and my first published book had been released in December of 2022. And the college men's coach's wife said, "Oh, I heard you wrote a book." And I said, "Yeah." And she thought it was about refereeing or about basketball. And I said, "No." "Well, you should write one about officiating. You refereed for 26 years at the highest levels, and you probably have lots of stories." And I said, "Yeah," but nobody would read them. And I thought that'd be it. Walking my dog, next couple of days, I realized Southern Alberta is rich in a long, long history of Alberta of basketball. And I thought, I'm retired now. I've still got some connections. I could probably do something. So I started with the idea of just doing all the history in 3 books. But the more I researched, the more it was going to take more. And so that's how we've ended up with series 1 for 9 books, and then series 2 to cover the rest. But the first series, we do Raymond, Cardston, and McGrath, and we look at all the high school basketball, senior men's, senior women's, town ball, church ball, and the communities who had high school programs that collapsed and were co-opted or joined the McGrath, Raymond, or Cardston schools. And then decided to finish the 4A schools here. We've got LCI, Lethbridge Collegiate. Chinook High School is only 14 years old, so it's only got a short history, but I didn't want to leave it out. So, and Chinook kind of evolved from LCI. So it's in the back of the LCI book. And then we have Winston Churchill and Catholic Central, the Lethbridge College, the University of Lethbridge. And then probably my most interesting one, I think, is, I call it, it's a 2-part book. It's called The Forgotten Programs and Officiating. And I call it Forgotten Programs because while I was doing my research, I found about 38 either high school or post-secondary basketball programs in Southern Alberta that no longer exist. So I had to bring them up.
Now, this is all really fascinating. The fact that you've already written 9 books for Series 1, and then there's several more coming for Series 2. You also mentioned Raymond. So can you tell us about the Raymond Union Jacks from the 1920s? Because I understand that they were one of the most dominant teams in the country.
At that time, they played in the very first senior men's national championship. Now, you have to remember, too, or realize that senior men's basketball across Canada was the top level of ball. It was a combination of university ball and what we would call professional ball, because there was no cross-Canada university competition, simply because the majority of universities in Canada were in Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. In the Western provinces, we had 1 per province. So senior men's ball was the big deal. They had their very first national championship in 1923-24. And that was interestingly enough, the year that the Union Jacks won the national championship. But there was an asterisk there because they won it by default. At that time, the challenging teams were expected to pick up the expenses of the visiting team for the championships. And the Ontario and Quebec teams refused to pay for cover Alberta's costs to go there. So the National Association, the national head of basketball, simply said, okay, you guys forfeit, we're awarding the national championship to Raymond. And so they were the first national championship team, and they're from Southern Alberta, small town Southern Alberta. So they kind of are a very famous team around here. And to this day, the town of Raymond, every once in a while, a new iteration of the Union Jacks will pop up. And the high school team now has a replica jersey of the Raymond Union Jacks as one of their high school jerseys. So basketball is big here.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, something viewers might find interesting is that back in the day, the main venue for Lethbridge basketball tournaments was at the Civic Center, which is now the Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was called the Lethbridge Sports Center initially, and it was the hub of the community. It hosted all kinds of events, political, agricultural, community events. There were 2 gyms, a big one and a small one, but it was also where most of the big-time basketball was played. The senior men's games were played there, and usually the senior men's games had a warm-up game that involved high school teams, but the university used the Sports Civic Center as its home gym for the first couple of years until they got their first gymnasium built. And it's hosted what was called the Christmas tournament for probably 40 years. That was a senior men's / college / university type tournament every Christmas, and probably one of the most famous in Western Canada.
Really? Wow.
Came from all over.
Now let's include a bit of history about women's basketball, because I understand that some of our nursing schools used to have some really good women's teams.
Well, let me touch 2 points on the senior women's women's basketball. There were 2 levels of senior basketball. Level A was the top level. That was the Union Jacks, Lethbridge Broders, Raymond or McGrath Rockets. That was A level. That was teams that had deep pockets, big sponsors, and they played for a national championship. The senior B level was teams that didn't have big pockets or big sponsors, and they played for a provincial championship. So there were 2 nursing schools in Lethbridge. At that time, the big hospitals throughout the province, there was no nursing program at a college. The hospitals taught the nursing programs. So here, the Galt Hospital nursing program and the St. Michael's Hospital nursing program each had ladies basketball teams that played in the senior ladies basketball league. And then they would travel to Medicine Hat and Calgary and play teams from those hospitals. But more importantly, at the senior A ladies level, we had a team from Cardston called the Cardston Shooting Stars, and they played for the national championship in 1947-48 against the Toronto Montgomery Maids. So here's a little team, ladies team from little Cardston, Alberta, traveled to Toronto to play, and most of them had probably never been anywhere bigger than Calgary. And so they traveled to Toronto to play the national championship game for senior ladies. The only time a Southern Alberta team has made it, women's team has made it that far. And they came in. So they're both at the senior ladies A and B levels. We've got some really strong history in Southern Alberta.
Now, while we were preparing for this interview, one of our producers read somewhere that the very first basketball game in Western Canada was played in Sterling, Alberta, back in 1903. Is that true?
No, it was played in Raymond, but it was won by Sterling.
Oh.
In 1904, the Raymond Agriculture Stampede hosted the first formal basketball game in Alberta. And actually, it was the Northwest Territories, and it didn't become Alberta till 1905. And it was played on the infield of the rodeo grounds, on the dirt. It was between McGrath and Sterling won the first tournament. Now, you remember, too, that basketball at that time, there were no buildings big enough in Alberta to play inside. So for the first number of years, until we could construct buildings big enough, it was a summer game played outside on the dirt. In my research, I found one picture of a ladies' team playing on the dirt in Southern Alberta, and it was the Claresholm College of Agriculture ladies' team in probably 1925.
Okay, good. I'm glad you're mentioning that, because you also mentioned Southern Alberta's forgotten schools, and I was going to say an example that Claresholm used to have an agricultural school that also had a basketball team. So can you talk more about Claresholm and these other forgotten schools?
Yeah, in 1911, the province of Alberta decided that they were going to build 6 agricultural colleges spread throughout the province, so that to give the farmer type kids, the farmer communities, an opportunity to learn to be better farmers. All the courses were aimed at the farm or the ranch. So the first 3 were built in Vermilion, Olds, and Claresholm. And the Vermilion School is now called Lakeland. And the only one out of those 3 that still exists is the Olds College. Claresholm College of Agriculture was around for probably 10, 11 years. Then it was converted to a hospital. There was a flu epidemic that they converted the college to a hospital, and then it was closed after that. None of those schools, other than Olds and Lakeland, out of those initial 6, still exist. But Raymond also had an agricultural college. And the funny thing about it didn't come around till about 1921. Lasted probably 13 years, but their men's team played until the 1950s. So even though the college was closed and their team was called the Idlers were still competitive as a basketball team into the early 1950s. well after the college even closed. So there was some community support, again, showing you a small town like Raymond. Not only did they have the Idlers, but they had the Union Jacks and the Comets, the high school team. So Raymond is king for basketball.
And staying on the topic of post-secondaries, there is a rich history of rivalry between the Lethbridge Polytechnic and University of Lethbridge basketball teams. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, that goes probably right back to the start, because the college, the Lethbridge Junior College, as it was called, was said to be the first publicly funded community college in the country. And it started its basketball program in the late 1950s. So they had basketball right from the 1950s. Now, later, the University of Lethbridge was granted its charter in 1967. But the first few years that the university was around, they held classes at the college because they had to build their facility. And then when the university was built, the classes moved across the river to the university campus, and they played their games downtown in the civic center. But they had a rivalry that was amazing. We had a game between the college and the university earlier this week at the college, and it attracted quite a few fans. But back in the 70s, we have our big building here is called the NMAX Center, recently changed to the visit Lethbridge.ca arena. It's where our WHL team plays, so it seats about 5,000 people. And throughout the 70s, that was the host gym for the crosstown rivalry between the Kodiaks and the Pronghorns. And they would, I don't know if they'd pack the place, but they would definitely get a huge, it was, and especially when the college would win, that would, the college beat the university, and that would just stoke that rivalry more and more and more.
Wow, that's just really fascinating to hear. Ken Hamilton is the author of Southern Alberta Basketball, A History in Pictures, available on Amazon. Ken, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.